I take you to be my spouse from this day forward, to join with you and share all that is to come. And I promise to be faithful to you until death parts us. These are the simplest, most straightforward wedding vows you will find in our Lutheran liturgy in the ELW. I like their simplicity and their honesty. There are other options. One offers language about in richer and poorer, in sickness and in health. Another suggests that we might promise that we will forgive as we have been forgiven. But since the long past OK Boomer days of church weddings in the church with cake and punch in the church basement, weddings have become completely customized, tailored to the needs and desires of each family. Invitations, events, venues, menus, officiants, rituals. You wouldn't believe how often I get random phone calls saying, "Are you a pastor?" Yeah. "I'm going to a friend's wedding and I Googled you and found you. Could you tell me how to do a wedding?" Honest to God, people call and ask because it's all customized. All the rituals, the playlists. No wedding is like any other. And in keeping with this hyper-personalization of the wedding, rather than using vows that have been tested for centuries, words that have stood the test of many marriages, couples like to write their own. Confidentially, don't tell anyone, I discourage the practice because it is far harder than you could imagine. We struggle to send a text message without unfortunate spelling errors or inappropriate emojis. Imagine how hard it would be to find words of gravity and dignity and permanence that will last a lifetime. A message emoji-free. Some handcrafted vows are far too intimate. Better whispered on a moonlit beach to Chris Forte than in front of your grandmother. I had a couple once look at one another and say, "When I look into your sultry eyes," I'm like, "No, stop, I don't want to know." Others are far too intricate, imagining every possible circumstance of marriage and resolving it there in front of their guests. "When you stay up late working, I will keep your side of the bed warm." Seriously, it's happened. "When the dog barfs on the rug, I will clean it up." Take it from me, those are the easy parts of being married. And most custom-written wedding vows are dishonest, not by design, but out of denial. When we make promises, we want to use words like forever, like always, like never, as though human love could be without limit. But we don't marry forever. We don't marry for always. Because sad but true, even the most loving, most faithful marriage ends. And we are married only until death parts us. Do we have to say that part, the death part? Couples say, "I don't want to think about death on my wedding day." Who does? Jesus has arrived. After chapters and chapters of traveling to Jerusalem, he has arrived, standing inside those storied walls. And as we could have expected, his reputation has gotten there before him. So he's alternately adored by the crowd as though he were Mick Jagger. Do you still know Mick Jagger? Am I that old that I'm the only one who knows who that is? Or splattered with questions like paintballs. "By whose authority do you do these things?" they asked. "Is it lawful to pay taxes or not?" they asked him in public. And today, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? None of those was a real question. They just wanted Jesus to say something stupid on a hot mic. When the Sadducees, disingenuously, because they didn't believe in resurrection, challenged Jesus' understanding of the resurrection, they did so with a troubling nuptial what if. In a discarded draft, first draft of the musical Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, the Sadducees sing a song of a solitary bride, tragically married to seven brothers. A pastoral colleague wondered darkly about this bride, widowed 7 times. Might she have had access to arsenic? It's been done. Or those short-lived brothers. What in the world was floating in their gene pool that made them last about as long as mayflies? We'll never know. And it doesn't matter, because it's only a story and an outrageous test of Jesus' eschatology, his belief about what happens to us when this life ends. It is also a perennial question for us. Speculation about life after death, a question which Jesus twists to fit the answer he wants to give. In a bizarre riff on Moses and the burning bush in Exodus 3, Jesus makes the claim that the dead to us are not dead to God. Because those whom God deems worthy, Jesus says, cannot die anymore. After all, Jesus says, pay attention to God's grammar. In speaking of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, long dead patriarchs, Moses used a present tense verb, is. God is their God, not God was their God, so ipso facto they must be alive? Really? The Sadducees looked at him sideways. Is? Was? Dead to us? Dead to God? Alive to us? Alive to God? Perhaps Jesus was imagining a famous quote from an impeachment trial that would take place 2 centuries later. It depends on what the meaning of is. Is there God? Was there God? How would you diagram that sentence? And where is my 7th grade English teacher, Miss Scheuer, when you really, really need her? Jesus just shrugged and went back to his teaching. For him, their effrontery was just another day at the office. But for us, we're stuck. We're troubled. Because Jesus had us at this. Those who belong to this age marry, but in the resurrection, the age to come, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. Remember the most troubling part of that simple marriage vow until death parts us? We didn't just make that up to be difficult. Marriage ends. And instead of imagining that the life to come will be just like this life, except maybe a little bit better, Jesus pursues a different image of life after this life. They will be like angels, children of God, children of the resurrection. All the images of life after this life are just that, images, imagining, speculation. Whether from Job, who says, I know that my Redeemer loves and will stand upon the earth, or from the Thessalonian correspondence, you will be the first fruits plucked for salvation. We can only imagine. Because Scripture offers no single image, no definitive answer, no timetable for how this will go when we stop breathing here and then. How long will we, like John Brown's body, be a moldering in the grave? Who will be there in that life to come, and will I recognize them? Will all these wounds be healed? Will all those broken relationships be mended? Will all the sorrows be forgotten? Will we get to choose between a harp and a harmonica? Will we care? The shock in Jesus' flippant answer to the Sadducees is not that God parses sentences differently than we might, is, was, dead, alive, but that all marriages end. For the happily partnered, that is a travesty. But for those for whom marriage is a burden, a struggle, a disappointment, the fact that marriages end is a relief. To drag that ball and chain around for all of eternity? Thanks, Jesus. I'm glad that some marriages, all marriages, end. But here's the thing. We can't have it both ways. We can't keep the relationships that we love in eternity and discard the relationships that we don't. We can't assume that the things we love will endure and the things we hate will fall away. Eternity belongs to God. It is not ours to design, and we don't get to choose who we will see, how we will see them, what that will be like. My dad died 18 months before my mother did, and every day of those 18 months was for her torture. I just want to see his face, she would cry. When my mom died in July, my husband and I were in the car racing, hoping to see her before she breathed her last, but we didn't get there in time. So when my brother called with the news, I whispered through my tears, "Say hi to Dad for me." Is that what the next life will be like? That we just pick up where we left off? I once served a rural congregation with an enormous township cemetery on the edge of town. The richest farmer in town and the most self-important had purchased the easternmost plot in the township cemetery. Do you know why? He believed that Jesus will return from the east, like the rising of the sun, and he wanted to be the first up and at him in Belmont, Wisconsin, when Jesus returned. It gets better. When years after he died, the cemetery had to be expanded. The family had his body exhumed and moved to the new easternmost plot in the cemetery. They knew he wanted to be the first to see Jesus in Wisconsin. Will it be like that? Obnoxious for all eternity? But here's the truth. All these things that we cherish and know, our relationships, our possessions, our structures, even our church, are temporary. They give order to our lives. That's all they do. They are not permanent. They do not save us. They are temporary. And like our bodies, which will return to the dust from which they were made, so will all of our relationships, all of these structures, all of these grand plans. Because at their best, they offer only approximation of what waits for us when this life ends. The Sadducees' convoluted question wasn't a real question. They were just messing with Jesus. But their what if provided Jesus an opportunity to speak to us about the blessing of limits. Soon to face his own death, Jesus had limits on his mind, the limits of life, the limits of relationships, the limits of structures, the limits of knowledge, and especially the limit of our imagination. We cannot begin to imagine what life with God will be like. So, in the resurrection, whose wife will the black widow be? We know the answer to that. We are married only until death parts us. But Jesus had more to say. In the resurrection, Jesus said, there will not be marriage, not even a good marriage, because it will no longer be necessary. but there will be life. There will be life. For to God, even the dead are alive, and of that life there is no end.